Hi, welcome to WACA-TV's debate between the candidates for the Select Board. My name is Cesario Contreras. I'm a reporter with the Metro West Daily News. Joining me this evening is Steve Mitchell, the incumbent and the current Select Board chair, and Preston Crow, who's currently chair of the Planning Board. First off, I'd like to thank you both for joining me this evening and for WACA-TV for hosting this debate. And now I'd like to go over some of the ground rules. So today's debate will be a question and answer discussion. Candidates will begin the debate by first providing 1-minute opening statements. Following that, I'll be asking a series of questions, and each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to each. My editor, Caitlin Kelleher, who's the Deputy Director of Multimedia at the Metro West Daily News, will let the candidates know when they have 30 seconds left on the clock by presenting a piece of paper on it that says 30 seconds on it. So that's, if you see it on the screen, that's what you're looking at. I'd like to start off by going in alphabetical order. So I'm going to give the floor to Preston first for his opening statement.
All right, thank you. My name is Preston Crow. I want to thank the Metro West Daily News and WACA for hosting this debate, and I especially want to thank you for taking the time to watch and consider our town's future. We bought our house in Ashland over 20 years ago, and my son is now finishing 4th grade in Mendez. You probably know me from the Planning Board, where I've served for 15 years working to improve new developments in Ashland. I've also served on the Sustainability Committee and on the Upper Charles Trail Committee. I love bicycling, nature, and science fiction. I've always tried to do my part to contribute to my community, whether through the roles I already mentioned, by cleaning up during Green Up Ashland Day, or helping as a foster parent. I'm now asking for your support and vote so that I can bring my service to the Ashland Select Board. Thank you.
Awesome. Now, Steve, would you like to give your statement?
Sure, thanks, Cesario. So good evening, my name is Steve Mitchell, and I am running for re-election to the Ashland Select Board. Thank you to the good folks at WACA-TV and the Metro West Daily News for hosting this event. First, I would like to extend my sympathies to the family and friends of George Floyd. No family should have to experience the circumstances of his senseless death. Sounds like a cliche, but after 9 years, I am still enthused and energized by the work, by the community engagement, and by the progress that we have made as a town. During my tenure as a Select Board member, I am proud of the many Select Board accomplishments, including establishing of our financial policies, creating an OPEB trust fund, increasing our stabilization fund balances, our AAA bond rating, increases to senior tax exemptions, enhanced human services resources, land purchases and preservation, infrastructure improvements, our green community status, and increased public safety staffing. This is why I'm running for re-election, to continue the work for a smart, safe, and sustainable Ashland. I ask for your vote on June 24th. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, to begin the discussion, I'd like to initially ask specific questions to each of the candidate, given their experience in the public office. So I'll start off with Steve. So Steve, you're the incumbent running for the position, and you're finishing up your 3rd term on the board, correct?
That is correct.
Can you talk a little bit about what you've learned in your time in that position and why you think candidates should consider you again for re-election?
Sure. I very, very good question. And, it's something that, you take on a role like this. For my own background, I started off on the Charter Review Committee. I came up and through the Finance Committee, and then became a Select Board member. And I will tell you, despite all of that experience beforehand, there is a tremendous learning curve involved. And what I've learned over my past 9 years is how to be a better community engager, how to be a better listener, how to be a better collaborator. I've learned that I don't have all the answers, that it's very important to dialogue. It's very important to not take the approach of knowing what is right in every particular situation. It's important that that we engage the public as much as we can. We work very hard to increase community engagement. It's oftentimes a difficult process, but we continually work on that because it's such a key part to what this role is, and it really requires a commitment to that engagement. It's a commitment to knowing the issues, and not just the issues on the select board that come before the select board. Select board appoints many committees. It's important that we know what's going on with those committees as well. They are they're advisory committees. Very important that we're engaged. Most of us attend many meetings beyond just our own meetings.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Preston, you've been on the planning board for the past 15 years. Can you speak a bit about how that experience can kind of lend itself to a role on the select board?
Oh, certainly. There's a number of aspects of being involved with any part of the town that is valuable experience, the planning board in particular. I've been involved to some extent with pretty much every new development in town in the past 15 years and worked to make them better for the town. And during that process, we have lots of public hearings and public discussions. And I've really come to appreciate the importance of listening to the public. You know, I have my own opinions as to what makes a project better, but sometimes when people come in, they have different ideas, and I need to listen to those and incorporate those. And sometimes ultimately we'll disagree with some of the people that come in, but it's also important that they feel that they're a part of the process, that we don't exclude anyone, even if we don't end up voting the way some people would prefer us to vote. So the importance of an open government and listening to people is very important. Also, just working with all the town officials. I've developed relationships through being on the Metro West Regional Collaborative with our state legislators and the legislators in neighboring communities, as well as select board members and mayors in nearby towns. So I really have a sense of not just our community, but the whole region. And I hope to bring that experience as well as new ideas and new energy to the select board.
Thank you. So as the state begins the process of reopening the economy and the town begins the process of opening up again, what do you think are the biggest issues the town has to deal with when it comes to its response to COVID-19? And I'll start with Preston since Steve's opened up the last question.
Yeah, this is an issue where it was barely on the radar when we started signing up to be candidates. And this shows that what happens in town and what the major issues are often completely unpredictable. And so it's important to pick people who are prepared to handle pretty much anything that might be thrown at them. At this point, we need to take this very seriously. I have a friend who died of COVID-19 a few weeks ago, and I've had other friends who've gotten sick and suffered through it, and it's not just another flu or bad cold. This is a really nasty disease, and we have to take it seriously. At the same time, we can't stay locked down forever. So we have to do our best to carefully open up and maintain social distancing and safety at the same time. Take the best advice we can from neighboring communities and the Board of Health. There's, the select board is just one piece of this. And we also have to take our own community values into account and look at things that are core to Ashland and make sure that we open them up in a way that keeps them as a value to Ashland without being unsafe. You know, things like the community gardens and the farmers market, those are important.
Thank you. Steve?
So obviously there was no playbook for any of this. So like most communities, Ashland was really not getting a whole lot of direction initially from the state. So in many ways, it was incumbent upon us to develop our own mechanisms for dealing with this as a community. I'm pleased with the response that both through the Board of Health and through our town management to put together programs to work to help our most vulnerable citizens. We need to continue to do that. We increased funding support for the emergency fund, for the food pantry. We created a restaurant program to help our restaurant businesses to weather part of this COVID-19 scenario. We created a task force that was designed to create, to actually be a clearinghouse for all of the cases that in Ashland and to monitor all of that information at this point. Obviously, we're in phase 2 now, and I think it's fair to say most of us are feeling very much want to be out in the world again. We still need to use the protocols. We need to be aware of them. At the same time, the select board tomorrow, we are having a meeting tomorrow morning to look at opening up our restaurant businesses and allowing them to open up in a safe way and conduct business.
Now, outside of COVID-19, when you think about the issues you'd like to address as a member of the select board, what are those specific issues? And I'll start with Steve.
So a little more clarity, Cesario, what I think are the big issues, is that?
Yes, the biggest issues that you'd like to address if you were to be reelected.
So I think in terms of, it's hard at this point, it's hard to separate COVID-19 because of its impact on our budget. Fortunately, the town, so I'm going to start with, I guess, the concept of sustainability, because I think sustainability is the major foundation for what we do going forward. And I use sustainability in the broadest sense of the word. So I'll start with fiscal sustainability. Fortunately, the select board a number of years ago committed to financial policies that allowed us to increase our stabilization funds. In 2003, we had a stabilization fund that was a little bit over $4,000. Today, our stabilization fund is in excess of $7,000. That's going to allow us to get through a portion of the impacts of COVID-19 in a sustainable way without laying off people, without diminishing programs and services at this time. Now, obviously, it's going to depend on the period of time it's going to take for the economy to recover. But sustainability in a fiscal sense is very important. Sustainability in an environmental sense is very important as well. We need to continue to improve our movement towards becoming a net zero community. We've committed to that as a community. Both the Public Safety Building Committee and the School Building Committee have committed to geothermal processes. So I think, I can go on and on for quite a while, Cesario. I think managing and caring for our vulnerable populations, for our seniors, these are very important issues as well.
Thank you.
If I could have another 5 or 10 minutes, I could really.
Yeah, another time. Preston?
Oh, I could go on for 5 or 10 minutes on this as well. Sustainability is a very key issue. With the moving forward as the town builds new buildings, we have to be absolutely sure they are the most efficient and long-term buildings that will incorporate our net zero values and low emissions values. I think one of the key words there is resiliency, that we need to make sure our town is resilient and able to weather whatever the next thing that comes to us is. And we're going to be dealing with COVID-19 and the budgetary impacts for probably the whole next select board term, the next 3 years. So it's hard to say, setting that aside, because there are a lot of things I would love to see happen, and the budgetary issues may slow some of those down. We can't slow down the public safety building or the new school, because doing so would actually raise the costs to the town, and ultimately we would pay more. Things I would like to see are things that will improve the community livability in Ashland. We have a lot of wonderful treasures like the town forest and the farmers market, and we have some new ones on the planning board like the dog park and the Upper Charles Trail. And there's potential for some other amazing new things, like what are we going to put in the old fire station building downtown? We could turn it into a restaurant. We could also turn it into a theater arts hub and have some really amazing things downtown. And I think that's the kind of new idea looking forward that we need at the select board right now. And I'd love to go on and on about sustainability as well, but I think that's my time.
Thank you. In November 2019, town meeting adopted a non-binding net zero resolution that would call for this town to offset the carbon emissions by 2040. As a select board member, how would you help the town accomplish this goal? And I'll start with Preston this time.
All right, this is a really core issue for me. I attended some of the meetings for the public safety building, and the committee was about to approve a very traditional HVAC system that would have used about as much energy as the existing buildings, the same energy intensity. And I got together with Matt Marshquist, the chair of the Sustainability Committee, and we put a lobbying effort in that helped change that decision to be a slightly more expensive in the short run geothermal system, but one that doesn't have the town adding a whole bunch of new carbon emissions right when we're about to tell other people, we don't want you using natural gas for new heating sources, and we don't want a new natural gas pipeline through town. At the same time, we also need to be looking at solar and encouraging it for both residential and commercial as well as municipal buildings. We have solar arrays on our home. I've been fortunate that we've been able to switch to electric cars for ourselves, and I think once you do that, you never want to switch back. And we should be moving the town's vehicle purchases to electric vehicles, and in cases where that doesn't work at the current time, we should certainly be looking at having the charging infrastructure put in place with new construction, so that when we're ready for that, we can have that. But if we're going to tell the town we need to make changes to be net zero, we need to lead as the town with our own building construction and with our own vehicle purchases and such.
Thank you. Steve?
So the very clear that that we've adopted net zero. We're all committed to it. The current select board. I do want to shout out to Matt Marshquist for his work and his efforts with the Public Safety Building Committee. He really is very methodical and analytical with his approach. So I think we all appreciated that as we were making our decisions. The thing I would like to talk about, the concept I'd like to talk about regarding net zero is equity. And when I say equity with net zero, I'm talking about the fact that not everybody can afford to drive an electric vehicle at this point in time. We all know that the market is eventually heading into that direction, but I can't afford an electric vehicle. I know there's a lot of people that can't afford an electric vehicle. I know a lot of people that can't. Most people may not be able to afford ground-sourced heat pump systems. I think this is something that as we move forward, we've got to be very aware of how we approach requirements for net zero and how we support those community members that may not have the resources to really take advantage of that. How do we, when we, I'm an advocate of affordable housing. As we speak to affordable net zero buildings, what does that mean? How do we make that work for people that don't have the same financial resources that maybe somebody like Preston may have? So I think we've got to be very careful with that. I'm very cognizant of the fact that we have a demographic of vulnerable citizens that we need to be concerned about, and we need to factor in all of these decisions that we make moving forward.
Thank you. A widely discussed project in town is Eversource's proposal to replace a high-pressure transfer line that runs through Hobbiton and Ashland. The company's preferred route would have the new pipeline be placed under the existing easement, and that easement intersects through more than 80 residential parcels, the wetlands, and the conservation restricted Great Bend Farm Trust. The company has also designated an alternative route that would mainly fall under public roads. Eversource has stated that the project is needed to address a pressure drop concern and to help bring in new customers. The project is currently being reviewed by the state's Energy Facility Siting Board, and the town has taken Eversource to land court over whether it has the right to leave the old pipeline in once a new pipeline is placed should its preferred route be chosen by the Energy Facility Siting Board. There's other processes going on in this project, but I'd like you two to answer the two following questions. Do you think this project is necessary, and how would you like this project to proceed? And I'll start with Steve this time.
So, do I think it is necessary? From what I've learned during this substantially long process is no. I haven't met anyone that's really in favor of this, whether it's the preferred route or whether it's the alternative route. So no, I've come to understand that the logic for this just doesn't make sense. The concept of resiliency in their analysis and Eversource's analysis does not convince me. The analysis of demand for the Framingham-Natick rationale for expanding this pipeline doesn't convince me at this point. We just had a consultant's report. We hired a consultant to provide a report for our use in future litigations. We assume there's going to be appeals and litigation, so we've prepared for that eventuality. We're still involved in, as you mentioned, Cesario, the siting board has yet to give their ruling. The land court has yet to rule as well. We've got appeals going on with the Conservation Commission as well. So there's a host of fronts that we're working on here. And I don't think I answered your second question so quickly. Remind me what the second question is.
Ideally, how would you like this project to proceed?
To proceed, I'd like one of those entities to say, you've convinced us, and we're not going to approve this project. So as simple as that.
Okay, thank you. Preston?
I was going to say much the same thing. The report from the consultant was stunning. It makes it very, very clear that the rationale that Eversource has for putting this in here is completely flawed. There is no need for this. Eversource wants to build it simply because they get to set their rates so that they make a profit above, as a percentage above their expenses. So if they have more expenses, they make more profit. They are going to make a profit by putting this pipeline in, and that is their incentive. The improvement to the system is completely unneeded, and especially as we look towards net zero and reducing natural gas use, not increasing, and all the other towns around us are looking at that kind of movement as well. The rationale just isn't there. So I would agree with Steve that the way I would like to see this proceed is not to have construction. And I think the town needs to go the extra mile and do everything we can to stop this. If it does have to go through and we have to choose between going on the roads and going through the wetlands, I dread the traffic impact, and I also dread the impact to the environment. I think all considered, I would probably choose the roads over the wetlands. But it'll be a mess. Either way, it's going to be a mess. I just don't want to see this happen. You know, I have one of those no pipeline signs in my yard, but I don't know that that's actually going to help anything. But makes me feel good.
Thank you. In the wake of the death of George Floyd, a Minneapolis man who died while in custody after an officer pressed on his neck for nearly 9 minutes during an arrest, protesters around the country have been calling for racial justice, police reform, and the end of police brutality. Peaceful protests are also being held locally. I have 2 questions I'd like you to answer in regards to this topic. As a town official, what role do you think the local government plays in addressing this nationwide concern? And do you think it'd be necessary to have conversations with Ashland's own police department about police training and use of force? I think I'll start with Preston this time.
All right, thank you. Yes, we need to have conversations. I think the conversation doesn't start with the police force. I think the conversation starts with the community, especially our people of color in town. You know, my perspective is, as a middle-aged white guy, that we're doing pretty good and that our police are not using excessive force, and that there's no reason anybody should be scared of the Ashland police. But I haven't had a lot of conversations with people of color in town, and I hope they feel the same way, but we need to have that conversation and make sure that we believe that the Ashland police are currently doing things right. But then we need to have a conversation with the police department either way and make sure that we fix whatever issues are identified and move forward with the understanding that, one of the big issues is, everybody says, well, yeah, there are a few bad cops. But the problem is the sense of brotherhood in the police department, police departments across the country, is such that the good cops rarely step in to stop the bad cops. And we need to make sure that the Ashland police understand, as part of their training, that's perhaps one of the most important part of their jobs, that if they see another officer abusing their authority, using trumped up charges to get somebody they don't like off the street, using too much force, that they say something and they make sure it gets stopped. That is where we need to go.
Thank you. Steve?
Sure. First, I want to thank and commend our Chief of Police, Ben Alfano, for joining thousands of police chiefs around the country in condemning the events in Minneapolis. I do think that in this case here, there's it always seems there's a few that stain all the good work of many dedicated officers, and this is like that. But for me, this feels different. This is almost a tipping point in a sense. Another card that or another body that's been that's been part of this ongoing foundations of racism, the legacy of racism. I think about a quote from, and I'm going to read a quote from Martin Luther King that says, "If you fail to act now, history will have to record that the greatest tragedy of this period of social transition was not the strident clamor of the bad people, but the appalling silence of the good people." So I think it's very important that we as a community, that we understand, first of all, we understand who the people are in our police department. I think it's, I personally know many of them, and I know that they are good people, but I think that's a reasonable conversation. It's a reasonable expectation for residents to understand the trainings and the protocols that they have. But I think it's a much bigger issue. This is a community conversation. We need to start walking the walk. We need to make sure that we teach our children well. This is not just about the police. This is about all of us.
Thank you. Last fall, the town conducted a national community survey in collaboration with the National Research Center. One of the takeaways of the survey was that major work still needs to be done to address public roads, traffic, and parking. As a select board member, what steps do you think the town needs to take to address those concerns? And I'll start with Steve this time.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the survey. I think it's really uncovered a lot of great information regarding the work of government, the confidence that residents have in government, but clear that there are areas that we need to continue to work on. And we know that our roads, we know that our sidewalks, we need to continue to work on those. We have two major projects that we have in the pipeline right now, the 126 reconstruction project, which is on the tip for 2021. That's the transportation improvement project list. And then we have our downtown renovation revitalization project, which would be an expansion of sidewalks, streetscaping, underground utilities in part of downtown. So this is very important, and we recognize that. I mean, our downtown has been in need of rejuvenation since I've lived here. I've been here for 45 years. It's time, and so those are very important components. And we know from the survey that those need to those are priority areas. On the flip side, it's encouraging to the number of people that responded to. We had 33% response rate on these surveys, which is phenomenal for a survey that literally took 35 minutes to complete for a resident. And I can go on and on about the survey. Tremendous amount of information. And very pleased that we were able to do the 2016 and the 2019 survey.
Thank you. Preston?
Yeah, especially with all the new development, considering things like legacy farms in Hopkinton, traffic is a huge problem and it's going to get worse. Trying to solve that is a huge challenge. And parking is not as bad a problem as traffic. Downtown, for example, we generally have enough parking. It's just not in the most convenient locations. We also have the potential for some new parking infrastructure with the new public safety building. We will likely end up tearing down the existing police building, and there's space back behind there and where the police building is that may end up being new parking downtown. So there's the potential for some parking assistance. But we also need to remember cars are not the only things on the road. We also need to be looking at how can we encourage people to get out of their cars and onto other transportation like bicycles and electric bicycles. And so far, Ashland has not built a single inch of bike lanes. And that needs to change. We need to start taking the concept of complete streets, where you build streets that are prepared for all the users, seriously. We've received some grant money for that. We've used it for some sidewalks, but we haven't done anything for bicycles to encourage people to be safe as they use alternative transportation.
Thank you. Earlier this year, the Environmental Protection Agency proposed its $20.5 million plan to clean up the remaining groundwater contamination caused by the Nyanza Superfund site. Although this project is outside of the town's complete control, as it's federally and as it's controlled by the federal government and the state government, what role do you think you play as a town official in kind of speaking on behalf of residents? I'll start with Preston on this one.
Yes, the town has a huge role here. While the federal government is leading this up, they listen to what the town and the community has to say. For example, there was a plan to add tons of sand to essentially bury the mercury in the Sudbury River in Framingham. And the residents got together and put up signs and made it very clear the community was opposed to this plan. This plan was going to be more disruptive than the solution that was worth. And the EPA backed down and said, okay, we're not going to go in that direction. So we need to look and evaluate what they're doing and make sure that the federal proposal matches our community values and what works well in Ashland. So as we look at that, we also need to recognize, the legacy of Nyanza is going to be with us forever. There will always be some contamination. They can't go and remove the top 200 feet of soil and rock and get down and actually get everything out. So we're going to have to work on, what can we get out and how do we live with what's left and mitigate the risk and keep people safe. So.
Thank you. Steve?
Obviously, Nyanza continues to be a major part of our community legacy. Back in January, Cesario, I think you were referring to the public meeting back in January that was held by the EPA at the high school. Preston, I don't think you were there. I'm not sure, but there was an extensive discussion about a variety of alternative remediations that the EPA was considering. They had decided on, or were oriented towards one particular remediation. A lot of their decision, of course, is based on money and funding. I think it's so critical that we as national citizens, not just local citizens, but as world citizens, that we appeal to our legislative teams not to defund the EPA. And, we read about this all the time. I think it's very important that we as elected officials are proactive with that. But to get back to the EPA meeting back in January, it was very well attended, had a lot of people. I remember, the Canes, Bernie and Maureen Kane were there. Now they lost their son, Kevin, to the impacts of Nyanza. The people like Cara Terrell and Dan Borelli, who grew up among those cohort of young people during that period of time, spoke very eloquently, very passionately about the need for this town to continue to fight for continued remediation.
Okay, thank you.
If I can respond just for a second.
Yeah.
As a correction, I actually was at that meeting, though I had to leave early because we had a planning board meeting later that evening.
Okay. Last month, the former Fusion Restaurant building was torn down on 12 Pod Street to make way for a new mixed-use development. The project was approved through a special permit. Some residents in the neighborhood have deep concerns that the new project is too big for the lot and will cause numerous issues, namely traffic and parking concerns. Others in towns welcome it and see it as a new chapter for the area. As work continues in the area with projects such as the Pond Street Revitalization Project, what do you think are key factors to keep in mind as development in that area continues? I'll start with Steve this time.
Of course. Cesario, just qualify that last part of the question, please.
What do you think are things that, like, as individuals have different opinions about the development going on in that area, what do you think are some key factors to keep in mind as development in that area continues?
Well, unfortunately, 126 has been and I'm going to use the word eyesore for quite some time. When my wife and I first moved to Ashland, we lived on Tri Street, which is a street that abuts off of 126. And many parts of 126 look exactly the same as they did 45 years ago. Now, I have certainly articulated my support for the 126, the Pond Street renovation project. I see it as a means of rehabilitating that entire strip, attracting a different type of business. Right now, we've got a couple of, and no disrespect to used car sales, but we've got several used car sales businesses that don't really enhance the appearance of it, of the strip. We have a old farm stand that's been in disrepair for maybe 10 or 15 years. I think we have an opportunity here to really revitalize a key strip of our town and really make it look a lot more presentable than it is today.
Thank you. Preston?
Yes, as Steve said, we do have a huge opportunity to revitalize this corridor as the rebuilding of Pond Street comes in next year. I could go on at great length about the 12 Pond Street project, having sat through it on the planning board. And the residents did come in great numbers and say, we think this is too big for this location. This is out of character with the neighborhood here. And if you look at the houses there, they are all small houses. They're some of the smallest homes and smallest lots in Ashland. And at the same time, we also received lots and lots of letters from people saying, we love this. Please let this go in. We need things like this in Ashland. And we worked with the developer to make the project a little smaller, a good bit nicer, add more green space, and make it really fit in a lot better. I know a lot of the residents who live near there still have very serious concerns. We did what we could to make it better, but we didn't kill the project because we saw it as an opportunity for revitalizing that area. And that's something we need to do as we go through the rest of that area. Make sure we listen to the residents and try to make the projects fit in. But we also want to encourage good quality projects. And at the same time, we need to protect those neighborhoods so that we don't revitalize to the point where people want to come in and tear down those homes and put up big giant homes. I was working on a zoning article that would have changed the zoning there, that would have made that very hard to do when we had the COVID-19 shut down any progress on zoning changes. But we certainly need to work to protect those neighborhoods as well as revitalize the streetscape right along Pond Street.
Cesario, can I just add one comment to
Sure.
This discussion, and just to acknowledge that there is a special zoning overlay district that exists on Pond Street, and in order that allows the a developer to promote or it incentivizes certain components or qualities of a project. So that's part of what's in play in that area as well.
Thank you for that. Staying in the theme of development and building development in Ashland, in your opinion, what could be some potential uses for the Valentine estate? And I'll start with Steve this time.
Well, currently there is a committee that's reviewing a number of options in terms of using the house and the barn together. You know, when there was first a project that was being proposed at the Valentine estate, the developer had volunteered to give the town the barn that exists there. We were going to dismember it and store it and then reconstruct it on another site. As it turned out, we've purchased the property. We have a house and a barn that can be used for a variety of purposes. This committee is looking at the potential of a farm-to-table restaurant. There's a number of these sorts of complexes that exist in New England. So that's one concept. They've been exploring a number of those. There was talk about potentially using the house as an adjunct to the community center, maybe something where the food pantry who is very tight for space in its existing space could be expanded there. We've enhanced our human services capabilities. The idea of having more offices. So there's those kinds of ideas that are being pursued at this point in time. I think it's potentially can be a fantastic asset to the town. Of course, all it takes is money. We'll find out as we look at the potential of a public and private partnership, something that would make sense for the town to engage in and really benefit the community.
Thank you. Preston?
Yes, I'll be the first to say I don't have a great idea for what to do with the Valentine estate. My intention is to listen to the other ideas because I don't always have the ideas. And it's not my job to always have the ideas. We need to do something where long-term this becomes an asset to the community, not a liability in upkeep. And whether that means we put some historical restrictions on it and sell it to somebody who's going to do something with it, or if we continue to own it and operate it as the town or lease it to somebody, you know, all of those are on the table. And I hope that 5 years from now, this becomes another part of the town that we look at like the corner spot where if we were to suggest doing something different about it, we would have people out protesting because everybody loves it. And that's what we want. And that's what we need to find the right idea and the right partnership to make it happen.
Great. So where do you think are the biggest opportunities for improvements when it comes to creating more open space and walking trails in town? I started with Steve last time, so I'll go with Preston to start off.
Oh, well, I love what we're doing right now with the Riverwalk. I think when that opens next month, that's going to be one of the greatest assets to our downtown. I can't wait to have a Dragonfly Festival where everybody can go and walk across the bridge. And I just hope we don't have EEE or COVID stopping that. That will be a wonderful day. We also have the Upper Charles Trail. We have a route that we have planned through the town as of 2016. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to get any movement on obtaining easements through the private parcels. So the Trail Committee hasn't been able to apply for grants and funding because you can't apply for funding for the trail until you have control of the property. But that is something that I want to see move forward. We also have, obviously, we've got other open space like the Warren Woods that are wonderful for hiking and open space. There's also a wonderful parcel practically right downtown that I would love to see the town get a hold of. It's owned, I believe it's owned by the Fenwall family, which is just across the stream from the Fenwall building. And if you've ever walked through there, you wouldn't believe we have something that natural practically right in the middle of our downtown. It's amazing. And one hope is that we could run a section of the Upper Charles Trail through there. So.
Thank you. Steve?
Thanks, Cesario. So this is something that the current select board is very proud of, and that is the acquisition and the preservation of quite a substantial amount of property over the past several years, in excess of 400 acres. And talk about the Niccolo property, which is an expansion to the town forest. We talk about the renovations that we did to the rehabilitation to the Cadillac paint site. That ultimately will be a park to service that neighborhood off of Elliott Street. We did buy the purchase part of a substantial part of the rail transit district. And there's 20 acres coming back to the town, potentially through a development, a proposed development. We purchased the Zero Tri-Street, which is a combination of wood and wetlands. We purchased the Girl Scout property, which abuts the Ashland State Park. Of course, we purchased the Valentine property as well as the Warren Center properties. When I say Warren Center properties, I'm talking about the pieces that we bought as part of Framingham State's purchase of the Warren Center. So, it's very clear that this board has been very committed to land purchases, acquisitions, preservations, commitment to open space. I agree. I think the Riverwalk is going to be a tremendous asset to downtown when the whole revitalization occurs. That when our streetscaping has been completed, it'll be just such a pleasant experience to walk through downtown Ashland. I really appreciate the shout outs for the farmers market and the Dragonfly Festival, two of my personal projects, founders of both of those. So I do appreciate hearing how those have been embraced by the community.
Great. Now the next one is more of a philosophy question. Oftentimes when a major project or development occurs in town, there's often a vocal group of people who speak out about it, speak on their opinion about it. But there's also a grand majority of people who in town who don't necessarily go to select board meetings, but still have great opinions about what's going on. As a town official, how do you navigate the vocal minority and the silent majority when coming up with major decisions? I'll start with Steve on this one.
So that's a great question. I think it's something that that we discuss. Now realize that we don't, as the select board, we don't actively get engaged in projects per se. We do get involved with development agreements, and it really depends on the circumstances that are involved. But typically that's, we try to stay in our own lanes here, and that's typically a planning board challenge, is to balance that vocal minority. But I think it's important to, for me, it's important to reach out and find out from the silent majority, let's say, and directly, because we know that that there are residents, there are people that want to see, they want to see the changes, they want to see the improvements. And I'll refer back to the survey, because it's very clear the information in the survey indicates very strong sense of improvements in certain areas. So, you know, I think it's important as a public official that we balance what we're hearing from folks. And you know, it's like affordable housing. You know, everybody loves affordable housing, but no one wants affordable housing next to them. And this is a challenge. And affordable housing is a commitment we've made as a board. It's a commitment that we've made as a community. We have an affordable housing trust. We should be doing better with affordable housing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Preston?
Yes, we've certainly had a lot of discussions like that on the planning board. One of the best examples would be with 21 Main Street, where the bagel table is now. When that was proposed, we had lots and lots of people come to us and say, this is too big. This is not the kind of thing we want downtown. Once it was built, we had lots of people come to us and say, this is the example of what we want downtown. And when you're looking at a project, you have to realize whether you're talking about a planning board project or an entertainment license for a restaurant. It's fairly similar in that you get a lot of people saying this is going to be really bad, and they point out what could be the worst case. And at the same time, you have to look at what the good side is and what's probably going to happen. And you have to go out and be available in the community for people to talk to. And it's always a tough decision. The important thing is that you make sure everyone has a chance to be heard. And everyone knows that you didn't just listen, but you considered their position and you evaluated why they were saying what they were saying, and you did your best to take it into account. And that's the best you can do.
Thanks. So we're closing up on the hour now. So I'm going to ask each of you to give your closing statements. So I start off with Preston. So I'm going to let Steve go first.
Okay, thanks, Cesario. So my family has lived in Ashland for 45 years, setting roots in 1975. My better half, Bonnie, is the current chair of the Ashland Board of Library Trustees. Our son, Matt, is a graduate of Ashland High School. Our community quality of life depends on the efforts of volunteers. I have been fortunate to have worked alongside many dedicated and passionate colleagues and volunteers. Clearly, the whole is always greater than the sum of the parts, and the progress and enhancements that we've made as a community have been achieved as a result of many residents committed to making Ashland a better place. If re-elected, my goal is to continue to improve and enhance Ashland's community quality of life, and I mean that in the broadest sense. I ask for your support. I ask for your vote on June the 24th, whether it's through an early or absentee ballot or an in-person vote. Vote for a smart, safe, and sustainable community. You can go to my website, www.steve-for-selectboard.com, but please vote. And again, thank you to the good folks at WACA-TV and the Metro West Daily News for hosting this dialogue.
Thank you. Preston?
Thank you. Thank you to the Metro West Daily News and WACA for this debate opportunity. And thank you to you for watching and caring about what happens in our community. If you want any more information about me, please visit my website, votecrow.com. Reach out to me on Facebook, or you can call or email me. Those numbers and addresses are on my website if you don't have them already. I want to work for a better future for Ashland. I want a future that is sustainable so that we protect our environment and natural resources for the generations to follow us. I want a town that is affordable so that we don't push out our seniors and struggling families. I want a community that is livable with great treasures for all to enjoy. I'm asking for your support. Please vote for me, Preston Crow, for Ashland Select Board. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both for coming out today and answering my questions. I'd also like to remind folks, Steve already said it, but the election is June 24th. You can also mail in ballot. The last day to register to vote is Friday. So for more information, please go to the town website. There's still a lot of helpful links on there. With that, thanks again. Both of you have a great night. Thank you again to WACA.
Thank you, Cesario.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.